Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 53 of D.A.R.C, the review series of course, for Gran Turismo's selection of undervalued, underappreciated models, cars which are easily overlooked, and cars which funnily enough often turn out to be pretty good sleeper cars. And in this particular episode, we're featuring a vehicle which sometimes occurs on Gran Turismo, occurs quite often in real life, and that is when you have a vehicle which is sold from multiple manufacturers with only some slight changes, but essentially underneath it's the same car. Kind of like with the Monaro, which is sold as a Holden, also as a Vauxhall, and also as the Pontiac GTO, but they're all essentially the same car. They have slightly different looks, slightly different tuning potential on the game, but they are essentially the same vehicle. That's a very similar situation to this vehicle. Funnily enough, another Pontiac, the Pontiac Vibe GT, which you can also buy as a completely different named model from the Toyota dealership. But it's essentially the same car. The Pontiac, though, has more power, which is why we're featuring that model. Now, it's an interesting vehicle. Initially, you would think that it was a 4x4, or an SUV, at the very least a small SUV. But it's actually not. It's actually a soft roader, more of a jacked up hot hatch than a full-on 4x4. It's front-wheel drive for a start, and the most off-roading this car will probably ever see is mounting the curb, and that's about it for most drivers who actually buy one. So it's not really a traditional SUV in any sense, it just wants to look like one. Now that said, that does essentially make it a pumped up hot hatch. So what kind of potential does it have? Well, actually, it's got very good potential, because the 1.8 litre turbo engine that it's fitted with can be tuned up to a very respectable 350 horsepower, which is probably more than you'd expect a car that looks like this to have. It also puts out 219 pound-feet of torque, which isn't that amazing for a turbocharged unit, but still is not bad. It weighs in at 1,041 kilos, which is, again, very good, and certainly lighter than it looks, and the fact that it is a front-wheel drive chassis does help with keeping that weight low. It's also not a very big car. If you see the car on its own, it looks kind of big and chunky, but if you put it next to a hot hatch, it's about the same size. Now, as far as price, it costs a fraction over 21,000 credits. So, pretty well priced. Cheap, certainly. Whether it's good value, though, is a completely different thing. As far as PP, it sits at 479, fully tuned, which is pretty good. Perhaps a little bit too high, I would say, but not bad. And I wouldn't recommend racing it at that level. I'd say 475 or lower would be better, especially 450 or lower. As far as horsepower per tonne, it puts out 336, which is pretty good considering it doesn't have a massive amount of power to deal with. It does have good power, but not insane power. As far as performance, top speed wise you're looking at around 180, 190 under its own power, which again is pretty good and certainly quicker than it looks. As far as acceleration, well, it's a front wheel drive car and it's not designed for a high performance, so it does wheel spin off the line. And the acceleration, although good once it gets going, certainly isn't going to break any records. As far as handling, again, although it's the size and style of a hot hatch, or a hatch at least, it doesn't quite have handling on the same level as something like a Golf GTI or a Clio RS, because even though it's a similar size and a similar weight, it's just not the same level of performance vehicle, even with the racing parts. So why have I included it in the series? Well, for the very simple reason that it's an underappreciated car. Now, being underappreciated alone isn't enough. There are plenty of cars that are underappreciated for arguably good reasons. They're just not that good. This car, though, like the Citroën that we reviewed yesterday, and like a variety of other cars in the D.A.R.C series, is not a bad car. I'm not saying that it's an amazing car, but it's certainly not a bad car. It has excellent power for its PP level. It's lightweight, it handles well, it looks interesting. The PP is a little bit too high, but not unworkably high. The price is low, the value is good, and it's easy to drive for beginners, for pros, for anyone. And one of the reasons, if not the main reason, why I chose to include it as part of these 5 special episodes of D.A.R.C is because nobody uses this car. Some people use the Toyota version, but the Pontiac even more so is so easily forgotten, because this just isn't the kind of car that you would ever buy from Pontiac. People who go to the Pontiac dealership on Gran Turismo go there for a specific reason, and that's to find classic or modern muscle cars. So this vehicle just isn't really on the agenda. But that means that it's potentially a fantastic sleeper car, and the fact that it has 350 horsepower at under 480 pp means that it actually is a sleeper car. It's quicker than it looks, it handles better than it really deserves to, and it's cheap. So what more could you really want from a low PP racer? It's not necessarily the best you can get in the class, but it's certainly worth consideration. So that's it for this episode overall. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.